The reason we are, and I'll go to my next slide, the purpose for this meeting today is because we are in a state and the entire country is in a budget crisis. We're in a position that we know that we are going to have to take some dramatic steps in order to balance our budget going into next year, assuming the state budget turns out the way that the governor and the consultants are telling us that it will turn out. So that's why we are here today. And we've asked the board to schedule the special board meeting, the special workshop, so we can talk about what we feel needs to be done in order to balance the budget and allow the board to give us input back, tell us what we want to see in the budget, allow the community to make comments on our proposals.
Mr. Dexter, if you can speak up a little bit, please.
I will try.
Thank you.
There's a way to move the mic closer.
Oh, it's taped down.
As Mrs. Winter said in her preamble, there are lots and lots of people asking, why are we back here? We just went through this in February. We cut $3 million plus out of next year's budget. We thought we were done with this budget cutting stuff. But if you read what the governor's saying, read what is coming out of Sacramento, you will understand that how severe the governor is saying this crisis is. As Dr. Fisher alluded to, the amount of money that is being lost at the state level in terms of tax revenue. You're probably all aware that the governor followed suit of the federal government and postponed tax day from April 15th to July 15th. Therefore, the state of California right now really doesn't have a solid idea of what their tax revenue is going to be. Right now, they're projecting a $41 million deficit, $41 billion deficit, as well as $13 billion in additional expenses due to dealing with COVID-19. But until the middle of July, they probably won't have a really good idea of what state revenue is going to be. Therefore, we're basing our budget based on projections that the State Department of Finance has given us, and they're really just going based on their research looking at the state economy. So that's why we're here today, because we know that we are going, in order to balance our budget based on what the state says that we are going to receive. There are a lot of steps that we and the board will have to take in order to reduce those expenditures. Talk about the deficit. The amount of reduction to K-12 education is expected to be $15 billion for this coming year. Part of that will be made up in what some folks are calling a negative COLA or negative cost of living adjustment. Normally, the local control funding formula is increased each year by a cost of living adjustment or a COLA. And actually, that COLA was anticipated to be about 2.3% this coming year. When the Department of Finance came out with their projection, it actually turned out to be a negative COLA of 10%. Plus, in addition to that, and this is very important for people, it's going to be a difficult concept for folks to understand, but it's very important that people understand that in addition to the negative COLA, we will also experience funding deferrals. And I will get into what the funding deferrals are here in a couple of slides. So the estimate right now, we are estimating that the effect of all these cuts and deferrals on Selma Unified's budget will be revenue budget will be between $10 million and $12 million. This is out of a budget that's $85 million. So it is a very, very large percentage of our revenue budget. I talked earlier about the status of the state budget. We estimate that the budget that the governor is going to sign in July, after the end of June, again, it's really going to be just an estimate. They're not going to know what the revenue is going to be until middle of July. And people, our consultants are saying that we can anticipate addition to the state budget sometime in August. So the budget that we're seeing now, and the budget that the state adopts in June, probably will not be our final budget. It's possible it could be better in August. You know, if tax revenue comes in higher than they expect, or if the federal government comes through with some stimulus money, it's very possible, it's entirely possible that the state could revise this budget in August, and it's better than the one we see in June. But it could also be worse than the one we see in June. That's if the federal government does not come through with a stimulus package, or if the tax revenue is worse, then it's possible then the state budget that we see in June could be worse. That's why in the slides that I'm going to show you later on in this presentation have such a wide variance. Well, we have a plan A for you and we have a plan B. And what we're going to ask the board to do through this process is adopt plan A. There are so many steps involved in the cuts that need to be made that we have to start those steps tonight. We're going to ask you to start taking some of those steps with your next board meeting because they're as you saw in the few layoffs that we had to do in February, you can't do those in one meeting. It takes multiple meetings to put those items into effect. And as Dr. Fisher said, we have to, because our reserve is not much higher than 3%, our county schools office is going to require that our budget be balanced. You know, if we had so there are districts out there with 20% reserves, and they can afford to maybe not make so many cuts as we are making because they've got a reserve to fall back on. We're not in that position. Our reserve is a little bit above, probably a little bit above 4%. Our 1 month's payroll is 3%. So if I'll talk a little bit more about the deferrals. If the state budget hits a bump, if there's a hiccup in the state budget, if they can't make a payment, and we have to dip into our reserve, in 1 month our reserve would be gone. So 3% is not sufficient in this environment. I think I've discussed all of these items. Again, if we do indeed have to cut $12 million, this is the thing that I want to stress on this slide. People may ask, you've got an $85 million budget. Can't you get $12 million out of a budget that size? Well, 65 million of that 85 million is already salaries and benefits. So the answer to that is no. We cannot cut $12 million out of our budget without somehow affecting personnel, either in layoffs or in pay cuts or a combination of those two. This is just a brief snapshot of our current year budget. And the thing I want to point out on this slide is that during the budget hearings that we held in January and February, you will recall that our deficit for this year at that time was about $1 million. But I told the board a couple of times, I anticipate that we could get that to zero or close to zero. And I am still anticipating that our deficit will be, right now I'm looking at $200,000 deficit, which in an $88 million budget is pretty darn close to zero. So I expect that we will start next year with a budget, with a fund balance or a reserve that is right around $5 million. But again, that's going to be just slightly above 4% of our total expenditures. And going into a year that we are going into, that is not enough. If you do the math, our LCFF revenue is about 70 or $71 million. Therefore, 10% of that is going to be about $7 million. The anticipated negative COLA that I am looking at right now is $5.4 million. So because of the way the state's form works, it's a little complex. I'll try to distill it down as much as I can in a few seconds. But the state on paper is giving us the 2.1%, I'm sorry, the 2.3% COLA for next year on paper, and then they're taking the 10% off of that. So the negative $5.4 million just represents the decline in revenue from this year to next year. Keep in mind that we're also experiencing a decline in ADA for next year, and that's going to cost about $1.4 million. But we've already taken care of that. When you made the cuts that you made in February, we took care of that decline in ADA, and so I'm not showing it up on this slide. That's already in the budget, our budget projection for next year. But the negative COLA is not. I talked earlier, a few slides earlier, about payment deferrals. In essence, a deferral is when the government tells us you are entitled, Selma Unified, to a $5 million payment in June. You can go ahead and book that as revenue in June and book it as a receivable. We're not going to pay it to you till sometime next year. So it doesn't show up in our budget. It shows up as revenue in our budget. So if somebody was not aware of those deferrals, they would look at our budget and say, hey, you guys look pretty good. You look like your revenue is in pretty good shape. However, it crushes our cash flow. When we have such a small reserve to begin with, and the state says, well, we're not going to make a payment this month. You go ahead and book it as a receivable, but we'll pay you sometime next year. Now, all of a sudden, we're in a position we might not be able to make payroll at the end of the month because we don't have enough cash on hand. So during this budget process, these budget discussions, I need the board, I need the community to keep in mind that not only is our budget being cut by 10%, but in June of this year, next month, the budget, the state is not going to pay us our June payment. So we are going to have to scramble to find money in other funds, perhaps borrow it through another trans issue, maybe even borrow it from the county schools office to make sure we can pay our bills and we can make payroll. June is our biggest payroll of the year by far. So we need to make sure we have enough in there to cover our payroll. Then in next year, 2021, the governor's proposed budget right now says that in May of 21 and June of 21, we will not receive a payment for part of April. So we will go 2.5 months without getting any cash from the state. That's there. Mr. Green and I talked about that this morning. That will make some districts go bankrupt. They will not have enough cash to survive those 2 months if they don't start planning ahead right now, which is what we're asking the board to do. Do you have any questions on that concept so far? So you can see the magnitude of those deferrals. Those 2 payments, 2.5 payments next year is $8 million.
Is that why they're saying poise yourselves for what's coming?
Yes, that plus the cuts, yes. Cash, our consultants, their mantra right now is cash is king. You need to protect and preserve your cash. And this is a just a graphic that our consultant did in their budget presentation yesterday to give you an idea of what those deferrals look like at the state level. The state is deferring payments to school districts by almost $2 billion in June. And they're going to pay, school services put July of 2020 on their graphic, but they don't know that for sure. We're not really sure when we're going to get that cash. And then the April, May, and June payments of 21 will be deferred until, again, sometime in 2021, but we're not sure when. Probably will not be July. I put this graphic in here to show the board, give you an idea of how what we're projecting for next year compares to obviously the year we're in right now, but as also our prior years. And unfortunately, I don't have a laser pointer with me, and I can point to you. But the bar on the far right is next year's projection, and you can see how big a drop that is visually from what we're projecting for all of this year, and definitely for last year. The change from last year to this year is caused by a drop in ADA, and as well as a drop in some one-time revenue that we got from the state. But if you go back to 2015-16, that's how many years back you have to go to find a year where the revenue will be the same as it will be next year. But the point I wanted to make by showing you this graph is that we know that we can live on the amount of money that we're going to get next year because we did it in 15-16. Just keep in mind the amount of money that we have received through the LCAP over the last 5 or 6 years. Some years, literally, it was millions of dollars in new money from one year to the next due to supplemental concentration grants. And that money was intended to provide services to students, which we did. We hired staff, we bought technology, we bought materials. We used that money the way it was intended to be used. And we put it into things that are ongoing expenses in a lot of cases. When you hire staff, you have to continue to pay that staff. And that's what we did with that supplemental concentration money. We also, with the base money, we added increases to our salary schedules. And that's permanent ongoing expenses. Well, now the state's taking some of that money back. And we have only one source to go to that we can take that money back. I hate to use that term, but that's what it boils down to. We have to take some of that money back. And we only have one source to go to do that, unfortunately. I also want to point out in this graph, if you, those of you who are around education in the last recession, on this graph goes back to 2009-10. You can see that our revenue back then was flat for 3 years in a row. So there's every reason to expect that the recession we are in now will last at least that long. So I don't want folks to get their hopes too high anyway, that we're going to escape this recession in a quick manner, because the last one did not come on as fast as this one did, and this one may be just as hard to get out of. The next several slides, before I get into these, I want to give a little bit of a preamble. This has been one of the hardest things I have ever done in my career, to go through a budget and try to pick out expenditures that I know will turn people's lives upside down. I know every position that's on here represents a person, a family, and hopefully it will only be temporary, and hopefully it won't happen at all. There's always some reason to hope that it won't happen at all. But I believe me, I recognize that these are people's livelihoods that we're talking about, and I take that very, very seriously. But we also have a business to run, and as I've told a couple of people, as I have sat them down and told them, you know, I'm just giving you a heads up. Your position is on this slide deck, so I don't want you to find out about it Wednesday night after the board meeting. I'm telling you now, as I told those folks, we're just doing right now what the rest of the world has been doing for the last 2 months. Business owners and managers have been sitting down with employees and telling them, I can't pay you. I have to send you home because I can't pay you. I'll try to bring you back as soon as I can, but I don't know when that's going to be. Those are the kind of conversations, unfortunately, we are going to need to have with employees over the next 2 months. So as I mentioned earlier, we've developed a plan A and a plan B for the board. Plan A is, I hope, is worst case scenario. I obviously hope that it doesn't get any worse than this. But what we're going to ask the board to do over the course of the next 2 months is to adopt Plan A. Doesn't need to be these exact positions or these exact level of cuts, but we need a number, in my view, that covers the reduction in the LCFF revenue, and it builds up our reserve, our cash reserve, enough that we can weather the deferrals that we're going to experience. And again, because whether we're talking about pay cuts or whether we're talking about layoffs or furloughs, all of those steps take months. Those steps take months to put into place because in order to do them, and which we're definitely going to do, in order to do them the legal manner in the state of California, many obstacles have been put in our path to prevent or forestall exactly what we're trying to do. But there's still legal ways to do it, but to do it in a legal manner takes months to do. So you have to start as early as you possibly can. So that's why Plan A, when you see the bottom line on Plan A, people are going to say, why is it that big? Why are you making cuts that big? And it's because if we don't start doing it now and things turn out as bad as the governor says they are, we will have no options left. We'll be out of options. And it's, as I told Cabinet, you can always rescind a pink slip. You know, if we give someone a pink slip, let's say June or July, and when the governor, when the tax revenue comes in July and it's say it's much better than we're expecting, we can always pull those pink slips back. Somebody's life been turned upside down in the meantime? Yeah, we get that, we understand that. But I would certainly much rather pull those pink slips back than to tell somebody on August 14th for the first time, I'm really sorry, but you're not going to have a job next week. I don't want to be in that spot. So I will try to be as brief as I can going down this list, but at the same time give you all the detail that you and the community needs to understand what we are asking. First item is a 10% pay cut across the board. This will affect every employee. 10%, each 1% of our salaries and benefits is $560,000. So therefore, excuse me, 10% cut is 5.6 million. And this will be for starting July 1st for the entire year. And it's my request at this time that this be made permanent, not a temporary cut, because if we make this temporary, we'll have to come back to you each year
and ask you to make the cut all over again. You know, if things don't turn around by the end of next school year, and these cuts are just temporary, we'll have to come back and do this all over again. So I'm asking the board, and we're asking the bargaining units to make these cuts permanent. And when the money comes back, which we know it will, it always has, then we'll meet back with the bargaining units, and we'll negotiate those amounts to whatever the board decides we can afford at that time. Overtime, subs, and non-personnel. This is every department, every school, every office. I am not proposing across the board cuts of X percent, because I heard someone say the other day, when you make cuts like that, it says that you don't know what your priorities are. So my office, and along with the cabinet, we're going to go through the budget department by department, school by school, and we're going to say, we're going to ask ourselves, how much can we cut from this department? And those kind of cuts will take the forms such as supplies, travel and conference, obviously, overtime, extra time. Let's see, what else? Some services, for example, we have a service that comes and sprays weeds in all of the lawns and all the flower beds. We might not be able to have that service next year. All of our maintenance and transportation staff and our food service staff, we provide uniforms and laundry service for them. Might not be able to do that next year, or might have to get cut way back. So those are the kinds of services we're talking about reducing next year. And I can tell you right now, that is not going to be easy to do. We're talking about in some of those departments, that means severe cuts. I didn't show a detail of that, those departments tonight, because it would take a very, very long time to go through that. But it's my intent, either probably at your first meeting in June, I will have that detailed list for the board and for the community. Intervention teachers. There's this slide is probably is mistaken. I don't believe we have. Mrs. Wood and I went through that list earlier this week. I think the number is closer to 19 than it is 22. So we'll have to revise this slide. But our proposal right now in Plan A is all of those positions be eliminated. In Plan B, if things turn out better, only 6 be eliminated. So that's the difference between A and B as we go through these slides. Plan A is all of those positions are reduced or eliminated, whereas Plan B, in this case, only 6 would be eliminated. Academic coaches, we have 10. Plan A is all 10 are eliminated. Plan B is half of those positions. Teacher librarians, we have 5. Plan A is all 5. Plan B is only 2 of the 5. Any questions on this slide so far? Program managers, we have currently we have 2 schools that have 2 program managers. All the rest only have 1, and some have none. So we're recommending that in both Plan A and B, both positions be eliminated. The elementary PE instructional assistants, these are the 6 classified aides that are in our, we call it the PLC support program, because it allows the elementary teachers some PLC time. In both plans, recommending all 6. Director of Educational Services, this represents our Director of Curriculum and Instruction, recommending that position be eliminated. Elementary PLC support teachers, who the board will vividly recall that we eliminated 2 of those positions in February. We are recommending that the remaining 2 be eliminated. The positive behavior aids, these in some cases are funded with LCFF, I'm sorry, LCAP funds. In some cases, they're funded with Title I funds, but we're recommending at this time that all those positions be eliminated. Administrative assistant in the pupil services department. This is a classified administrative or clerical position. Grounds worker, these are the folks who mow the lawns and trim our hedges. We're recommending this represents one position. The athletic administrative assistant, this is a clerical position in the high school office. There's one person in that classification. The district receptionist, we have 2 part-time individuals or positions in the district right now. We're recommending that this position be one of the 2 be eliminated, and we will make more use of our voicemail system at the switchboard. Library administrative assistant, this is a clerical position that was added for the coordinator of library medias a few years ago. Recommending that be eliminated. This one is a community liaison. Unfortunately, this is a position we just created 2 months ago as part of the layoffs of classified staff from the last budget cut workshop that we did. We eliminated some of the program manager assistants and created a community liaison through the negotiations with CSEA. And we are now going to recommend that that new position be eliminated. At-risk counselors, we have one at all of the secondary, one at each of the secondary sites. We're recommending that in Plan A, all 3 be eliminated, and Plan Bs because of the services that these individuals provide to our students who are most at risk. We would like to keep these positions if at all possible. IT administrative technician, this is a position that was added to the technology department to back up some of those positions just a few years ago. We're regretfully recommending that that position be eliminated. The career technician, this is a single classification at Selma High. This person works with high school students to make sure that they're prepared to apply for college. Recommending that one be eliminated. One maintenance worker, these are the folks that do all the repairs in all the facilities throughout the district. This represents one position. Transportation routing routing technician. This is also a position that was added fairly recently, sometime in the last couple of years. This person takes some of the load off of the other administration technician in that department and does a lot of the bus routing and works with the principals and the site secretaries to schedule field trips. This one will be a very, very tough job to absorb. There's a lot of work done at this desk, which will be tough to absorb next year. The account technician, this is one of the part-time financial positions in my office, recommending that one of those positions be eliminated. And also because we're hoping that if things are not as bad, that we can bring that position back. Avid tutor at Selma High, this is a part-time classified position who works with those students who are in the Avid program. And again, because of the nature of this position working closely with students who are most at risk, we're asking that this one be brought back if the budget is better. Total proposed cuts in Plan A, just short of $13 million. Plan B is just short of $10 million. I just want to stress again the reason. If you go back to the previous early slide where you saw that the budget cuts, I'm sorry, the revenue cuts were expected to be 5.4 million. very natural to ask, if your revenue is only being reduced by that much, why are you asking for cuts of almost $13 million? And there are two major reasons. One is we don't know if it could get worse when tax returns come in July. So we are asking the board to help us guard against that contingency. And we know that, or at least we're being told anyway by the state, that we will also have several of our payments of several $1 million each deferred into subsequent years. And we don't have the cash to weather that cash shortage. So unfortunately, I believe we need to make some cuts to build up our cash reserve so that when the state doesn't make those payments, that we can pay our other bills. Do you have any questions on those so far?
Larry, I have one on the, we have until June 30th to approve about the budget. And you're talking about the taxes coming in, revenue in mid-July. Is there a window there for us? Clearly, some people are going to get laid off. But if it comes back in July and it looks better, then there'll be less people we would have to lay off. Is there a window there where we actually have to let these people go?
Yes. For certificate, the answer to that is yes. There is a law in the education code that allows us that the law essentially says that if the state budget provides less than 2% increase to school districts in their revenue from year 1 to year 2, that this second layoff will automatically open. And it opens, generally speaking, it opens around June 30th. So it's not even available to us until the end of June after the state budget act is passed, signed. And it's only open until August 15th. So we have to have all of our resolutions, all of our documentation, all those certified letters ready to go as soon as the state budget is signed, whenever that occurs, sometime between June 15th and June 30th, so that we can take all of the other steps that are necessary before August 15th. It's also entirely possible that, as has happened in previous recessions, the legislature recognizes that this window is open and it's automatic because the way the law is written. Our friends in labor have gone to the legislature and asked them to not make that available to school districts. So the legislature in the trailer bills that enact the budget put language in that says, school districts, you are not allowed to lay off certificated staff. This window is closed to you. You cannot lay off staff. That's very possible, entirely possible that will happen. I don't know what we'll do if that happens. But to answer your question, yes, there is a window of time between the end of June and August 15th. And as I said earlier, it could come to pass that in that time frame, the state will revise their budget, and it could go either way. It could be better, could be worse.
So let me, I'm just going to reiterate a couple things that I said earlier. I know that our audience has grown tremendously since I made my first comments at the beginning. And I have been watching all of the comments that are going across the screen. I want to reiterate that this is a discussion only. We are not making any decisions tonight. And actually, we are going to be hopefully pushing our June board meeting to June 30th. So we will be making those decisions at the absolute last minute that we have to make them. I just want to reiterate, these cuts are being made from the state. Have we had some money issues in the past in our district? Yes, we all know that. We all know what happened a few months ago. So it just sickens all of us up here to be back in the same boat again. So again, I'm gonna put my plea out before I start going down my list of things that my list of questions, if there's no questions from the board. Reach out to your state legislature. We put on the district website, there's a link to your state assemblyman, your state senate, and Congressman TJ Cox. It has their phone numbers, their addresses. Please, please, please reach out to them. Reach out to the governor. They can fix this so the cuts do not have to be this deep. It really, we were on a webinar yesterday with Capital Advisors up in Sacramento, and they really reiterated the importance of us as a community across the state reaching out and really pushing our legislative body to really make our students a priority. A couple of questions. There was a question regarding Doctors Academy that is not slated to be reduced.
That's correct. Doctors Academy is still in our budget proposal to remain.
Okay, so Doctors Academy is not going to be reduced. I'll rephrase that. The next one, there was a question regarding the CARES Act. So if you could maybe address that.
Great question. The CARES Act is a federal grant that's already been awarded to the state of California. I don't remember the numbers, it's several $1 billion. And Selma Unified, we are expected to receive about 2.5 million of that funding. We have not received it yet, and I believe, I need to verify, but I believe what I heard in my teleconference yesterday with school services was that the governor is going to keep that and use that to reduce our LCFF negative COLA. What I don't know if that is totally accurate, and I don't know if it would reduce it from 10% to a lower amount, or if that's what he used to reduce it down to 10%.
I understand the second scenario. He already took the portion.
That makes the most sense.
Yeah.
So that's, I had that in my original slide deck, and then found out that there was some question about how it was going to get paid. So I took it out. But if we'll see how that works out. If it comes in the form of an additional one-time grant from the state, then we'll certainly come back to the board and ask you to make some changes in the budget based on that.
Question on the
Todd,
state.
a quick favor. Say you are being asked because people can't really hear and don't know who's speaking.
Okay.
So they're asking that we say our name first and talk loud.
Paul Green. Based on the meeting we listened to last night, is my memory correct on the state budget that there is a rainy day fund in the state of California for approximately $90 billion?
There is definitely a rainy day fund, but no amount, I'm not.
And as of today, the governor has not allocated any of the rainy day funds to education.
That's my understanding. I've read that he has some reserve funds available at the state level that, for whatever reason, he's chosen not to use toward reducing the deficit as of yet.
Okay. So there's also a question regarding furloughs. If furloughs have been given a thought.
Yes. The issue with furloughs is that, when you remember back to my first slide where I pointed the slide that we're asking the board to cut pay across the board by 10%. Generally speaking, the value of one furlough day across the board is about 0.5%. So if we were to cut every employee by 1 day, their duty year by 1 day, it would generate about the same value as 0.5% on the salary schedule. Therefore, if we were to try to raise $5.6 million, we would have to cut everyone's duty year by 20 days, which is a full load of money. It's not possible to do that and operate schools. So that's why we put on the slide, rather than furlough days, just an across the board cut.
What's some further options for considering whether to add or to consider furlough days at all to reduce this amount?
I would anticipate that during our bargaining with the units, both pay cuts have to be bargained with the units. We cannot implement that unilaterally. I imagine that during those negotiations, furlough days will be discussed.
There was a question regarding if we don't have a balanced budget, what are the consequences of that?
If we do not give the County Office of Education a balanced budget, and if we do not show in that budget the concrete steps that the board has taken to reduce expenditures within our expected revenue, the county schools office has the ability to reject our budget. And they will, if that happens, they will not allow us to pay our bills until we have that. That's their ability. Doesn't mean they will automatically do that, but they have the ability, if we don't have an approved budget, to automatically, they have the ability to not pay our bills, not allow us to pay our bills.
There were some questions regarding the reserve. First of all, why is our reserve so low? And secondly, is it, those are the questions regarding the reserve.
Yeah, I don't like reserve low, I got that.
Yeah.
Can you spend it down was what I
Oh,
thought.
right. Yeah, yeah.
If you spend the reserve down, you might want to think about the requirement, Barry, on that. We have to maintain a certain level.
Yes, we are required by law to have a reserve that is no less than 3% of our total expenditures. That is the bare minimum. And in my mind, in any year, 3% is not enough. And a year that we're heading into, 3% is nowhere near enough. So I guess my response to that question would be, our reserve is actually lower than it should be. Therefore, spending that out farther than responsible
Just to reiterate, the cuts, I saw a lot of questions regarding the cuts. Are they across the board? They're across the board, from the top down. And then the other question, can we take this 1 year at a time instead of doing a projection down the road?
That's possible. Yes, we could, as I discussed earlier, it is possible for us to do temporary cuts, temporary furloughs. We played with the idea in prior years of freezing step and column for a year, but in my experience, it's been that just prolongs the pain. Again, I understand there's a large number of people on this list that are looking at the possibility of being out of a job in a job market where it's going to be very tough to find a job if you're out of a job. I do understand it. But we are running a business, and to ask the board and the community to go through this again a year from now and possibly go through it again a year after that, I think to me, it would be irresponsible of me to ask you to do that.
I think also what we have to consider is when we're doing the budget, we're required to do a multi-year projection.
That's correct.
So you have to be able to submit a budget that says, you'll be able to do, even though things are volatile, even though the funding is volatile, we have to be able to say that we're being forward thinking. You have to present a multi-year projection for how you're going to plan to maintain your business. And before we started to deal with the COVID-19 crisis budget, we spoke about that. We did the first round with the $3 million reduction, and then we thought we would have our budget committee come together and see what other reductions we need to look at in year 2 and year 3. We have to look a few years out. We're not able to look just year to year. So that's also part of why we have to really look at the worst case scenario. Is what we've been given in terms of directions for consideration, and then back up from that, and loosen up if we're able to, if some of that state money comes in. Because nothing would be worse than if you didn't plan for it, and then you have to call people a week later and say,
This is Winter. Can I go back on the slide?
Yes, please.
We've got some emails that I accidentally skipped the slide.
Oh, okay,
I apologize for
that's
that.
fine.
This is slide 15. We have the first item is executive administrative assistant. This is one of the confidential employees in the district office that reports to one of the assistant superintendents. We are recommending the elimination of one of those positions, and this is both in Plan A and Plan B. Executive clerk, also a district office position. An elective teacher who is teaching an elective at Lincoln. We believe that our student numbers in the electives is on the low side there, and we are able to collapse an elective position there. Heartland, same thing. Their student numbers in the continuation program are on the low side, and I believe, and have been for a couple of years. I believe we have the ability, and I'm talking just about numbers. We still have to look at credentialing. There's some specific credentialing issues we have to deal with in continuation that we still have to look at. But as far as the raw numbers, I believe we can collapse a class there. And then the operations administrative assistant. This is the clerical person that is in the operations building where our director of operations is. Any questions on that slide? I apologize. Thanks, Eric. We'll go back to the video. Any other comments or questions?
So a lot of the questions I'm seeing come across, I'll just make a statement, again, as a board, nothing is off the table at this point. We will continue to look, and as board members, as we did last go around, and I'm watching these comments. There was another question regarding paying for police at this point.
If you go back to my very first slide, I talked about the $1.5 million that we are going to try to cut from non-personnel items. And that part of the proposal, I'm envisioning reducing the school resource officers from 2 to 1. But that's certainly, we haven't had any conversations with the city about that yet. That's certainly an area that we can discuss with the board and with the community and with the city, but I was envisioning reducing that by 1.
I did speak with the city manager. They're having budget discussions, and I think they might be considering bringing back those officers. I don't know if you got the email that I.
Yes, I did. They're having that discussion in their budget conferences.
Right, because I had earlier discussions with city manager Gallivan and shared where we were in the budget and what our concerns were. We had a meeting with the secondary principals, and we had a safety meeting, and we discussed the supports that our SROs were providing, and if this was something that they would want to continue. Would the site see benefit in continuing, or maybe moving in another direction? And there was feedback from the sites that they felt that this would be an opportunity for us regard to supports and services that they were receiving from the SROs because they were still on call with the city. And sometimes, they may or may not have reported to duty, and there was some concern with good communication. So the schools were saying maybe we can look at how we're using our existing staff and can do some things. Additionally, we're not sure what the school model is going to look like when we reopen. We are having discussions now about how our campuses are going to run when schools reopen. We know definitely when students come back, they will not come back to classrooms like they were when they left. We're hearing that we may not be able to have any more than 15 students in the classroom. We're hearing that the capacity of students on campus could be diminished by as much as 50% every day. So all of these factors are things that we have to consider when we think about what will instructional delivery look like. And so we're considering those things just as we did with the SRO contract. We're going to have reduced students on campus. Everyone's looking at their dollars. Is this a cost that we might be able to look at differently over the next few years? Making sure that we're maintaining safe campuses, but looking at how we're structuring the use of our existing security staff without additional cost to the district.
Somebody asked if we can please post the slides on, link for the slides on the district website, please. Question, elective at ALMS, what elective they're asking is?
That remains to be determined.
Right, yeah. Okay. We did speak with the principal though. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. And then have several questions regarding retirement again. Can we put retirement back up for some teachers? That's been asked a couple of times. If we're able to address that issue. Just talk loud, Teresa.
I have reached back out to the company that we worked with earlier this year, PARS, and my executive assistant is running numbers and pulling information regarding possibly offering that. It does need to cost out for the district, again, to be a cost savings measure, but we will look at that for individuals who, in light of all this and in light of possible salary cuts, might then decide to take an option of that retirement. So we will very definitely explore that, and we'll report back to the board and to the public regarding any numbers, any possibility of offering that retirement incentive again.
Anybody on the board, any questions? Diana, you've been writing down. Did I miss? Did I miss?
One thing that I've been noticing on the comment thread, we're not the only district who will be doing this. Are we just basically the first that is having the meeting? Or is this going to be held districts countywide?
There are some districts out there, they're right in the gamut from soup to nuts. There are districts out there that are in a blind panic because they know when this deferral is made in June, they will be bankrupt, essentially. So they're in a panic. You have the small districts that have a superintendent / principal and a secretary and a custodian and a bus driver, and all the rest of their staff is they have one teacher per grade level. There is nowhere for those folks to cut. It doesn't exist. Then you have other districts on the other end that have stuck their head in the sand and either have a big enough reserve that they can weather it. There are a lot of districts, maybe not a lot. There are quite a few districts in California that are what is called basic aid. They don't depend on, they're wealthy enough that they don't depend on state revenue. So they depend on property taxes, which is a risk in itself. So they're not too concerned about losing state revenue. But it's curious to me why we haven't seen more headlines in the paper of school districts doing just what we're doing right now. I can't explain it.
And just to add to that, we were given a list, a 2-page list of all districts in Fresno County and the amount of reduction that's going to happen in every district. So it's not just Selma, it's across the state. And calculations were noted what the percentage of reductions were. So yes, everyone is going to entertain this conversation. To what degree depends on the size of the district, their reserves, and whatever decisions they're going to make at a local level, but there will be fiscal impact to every district other than maybe basic aid.
Every district in the state is going to get cut to some level.
Another question that I have is basically where we don't know what the fall semester is going to look at. We're being asked to make decisions without being able to see the crystal ball. How will we be able to, or will we even be able to pivot some of these decisions we're making to fit the needs of what the new school year looks like?
Yes, unless it turns out worse than you're expecting, then we're very much out of options. If we don't act in time, we're out of options. However, if the financial picture turns out better than we're expecting, as I said a few slides earlier, we can always rescind some layoffs. We can rescind pay cuts if that's what we choose to do. We can add money back to department budgets if that's what we choose. Yeah, there are lots of options if things turn out to be better. But that, if I could take that one step further and just point out, as the question alludes to, fall of 2020 is going to be unlike any other beginning of school year that we have ever seen in our lifetime. And what this budget does not account for is what if we're in a position where our buses have to make 4 runs a day? What if they have, all of our classes are run on an AM, PM schedule, and our drivers have to pick kids up, bring them to school, take them home, pick up the next group, take them, we're not accounting for things like that. We're not accounting for new expenditures in the way of personal protective equipment. We don't have money budgeted for those kind of things. So that's a hole. It could be a big gap that we're not totally prepared for.
So one question that keeps popping up, and I'm just gonna, and I kind of stated it already, talking about cuts at the top. Again, we have not made a decision. So as a board, we are looking at all of our options. So that's I guess that's my way of answering that question. Everything is on the table. There is nothing off the table as far as cuts go. Somebody asked again, can we suggest ideas? There is a link on the website to be able to submit more questions and suggestions.
Yes, it's ready to go, right, Eric?
Yes.
Over the last night.
It's pinned in the question, in the comments, so they can see it. The link.
Yeah, he put
Okay.
it in there, yeah.
So yeah, in the comments, I guess there's it's pinned there to be able to go onto the website and ask your questions or comments or feedback for us. Again, let me reiterate again. I know there's somebody asked a question directly to us board members regarding holding people responsible for mismanagement of our district funds. As a board, our only employee is Dr. Fisher. Personnel, that falls under personnel. So I really am not going to answer that question like I did not answer that last time go around with this. So there was a question, can we look into closing a school? That was a question that was asked.
I had that conversation today with someone from CSW that's working with us on facilities. We're doing facilities updates. We had a conversation of possibly about closing one of the schools and merging. That's a process that maybe can be looked at over a year or two, because you have to study a lot of factors. That's not something we can do by the fall, but it's certainly something we've spoken about before, perhaps closing a school and maximizing the space at another school. So it's certainly something we can consider, but it's not something we can consider for an immediate. It's something that will take some time for that to happen. It wouldn't be something that we could do for the fall to address the immediate needs, budgetary needs.
If we have classrooms available at another site, I'm not saying I'm suggesting we do this, but if we have classrooms available at another site, why does it have to be studied and why would it take so long?
Because, well, we have some classroom space, and I'm going to speak to, like Eric White. They have some classrooms there that can be used, but it's not, it's by grade. They have specific classrooms, but it's not a lot of room. We have to study to see which grades could be held at that site, and the grade spans, because we have PK over there. So you have to kind of see how many rooms are there, how many students can fit. It's not off the table that we could have Washington and Eric White combined, because those kids are siblings. Generally, they end up at Eric White anyway. I think we spoke about that a few years back. So that's a possibility. One of the things that we're struggling with right now is if we open in an alternative model where kids might have to come back Monday, Wednesday, Tuesday, Thursday, or if we're going to have to do morning session, afternoon session, how are we going to use all the rooms and how are things going to be configured, depending on how many grades we have at, how many classrooms we have in second grade, how many classes do we have in third grade. And if we only bring it back 15, we might be using those extra rooms to cover the kids that are at that school, because we can only have so many in a classroom environment. So there are a lot of moving parts, and so having the school collapse, it's a discussion that can be considered, but until we know what's going to happen with regard to how we're coming back, I would not think that combining the schools would be an option for this year, for the coming fall.
So June 30th is going to be the actual vote. Do we have anything planned for the community? Any other plans for the community?
We need to plan, we need to plan at least one more.
Yeah, so we have input. Kind of like a workshop? Maybe a virtual workshop?
I think that's the only thing we can do.
Yeah, it has to be virtual. And, you know, better suggestions than what we're doing now is fantastic. It's just really hard when you're doing a call-in.
Oh, yeah.
To have, so any other suggestions we can have? I mean, right now we have 435 people watching this.
Yeah.
So.
That's the whole point. Yeah, any suggestions, just to have that input. You got to be able to input.
So with that said, again, there is a link to the website to go ahead and put the input in based on what we're hearing now. Those questions will be gone over and can be.
We'll look at them for trends and patterns and group them all together and see what the feedback is. And then we can certainly bring any other recommendations back to the board as we're looking at further, looking at the list. We'll consider what kind of feedback came in. And tonight was our opportunity to be able to glean some of that in some kind of way. So if we're able to fit in another meeting, or I can talk with Jennifer about what that might look like and when, because we're going to run timing is gonna be the issue. When they set that up and what the format will look like, it might be just similar to this one. After we've looked at the input we received tonight, and maybe look at what's being recommended, then the board has a discussion about it, and then we revamp the list, I don't know, and then maybe have another session like this and see if there are any differences from the first one, but we're gonna have to make a decision.
I mentioned to you earlier, we are tremendously pressed on time, but I still think, especially making these type of cuts, that our site administrators have the most knowledge of their site and what they need, what that site needs, all of them being unique. And I would at least like to see recommendations from each of our site administrators for us to just look at. And they may have a position that they think is more important than one that we've recommended to eliminate, or vice versa, that there's one eliminated that absolutely must stay.
Yeah.
I can't in good faith make a educated decision in the vote that's going to affect people's lives without at least having that information.
What somebody asked, they want to hear from us as a board. What are our thoughts? I think at least for me, I'm taking all this in. Like I said earlier at the beginning, I can't believe we're back here again. And it's overwhelming and disheartening to think that we have to make some cuts again, and hopefully to, we just gotta believe that we're gonna do the best we can. So.
Will the form that's currently available, will that be available to the public after tonight? So that is there a way for someone to, okay,
It will stay up so people can
continue to
until we kind of get through the end, because sometimes you need to think for a little bit.
Right.
So yes, it will stay up on the district website until we're able to get to the point where it's pretty much made a decision. So until 30 or not.
Yeah. Any other
And
comments?
I'll be checking that first.
Any other comments?
I just say you're right. I mean, I agree. These are hard decisions. They're not taken lightly. It's tough, but we want to make the right ones. We want to do it right. We want to make the right decision and do it right. But we have to possibly cut where we have to cut, and it's just hard. It's a hard decision from a business point of view, but it's not things you want to do. You want to try to save as much as you can, save the whole boat.
Yeah, I agree.
I just like to kind of add to what Jennifer said twice. We need to contact our list of politicians that they cut the money funds such a great amount. As like I think a lot of you have said in your comments, there's a projection to cut a lot of teaching positions in here. We don't even know what school's going to look like in August. We're being asked to make decisions in the dark. And our governor and our representatives need to know that.
Well, I'm going to, except for safety, it'll be hard to get me to vote for anything that's related to safety being cut. But besides that, when I vote, I'm going to vote on pretty much what I hear from the community. Where they want the cuts to come from.
I think that's fair. I think also it's incumbent upon us to help the community to know, make sure that they're making recommendations from an informed perspective and not
Yes.
from their own,
Yeah. that's-
you know,
Personal agenda or something.
yeah, so, and that's fine as a public servant.
That's what.
That,
that's what-
that,
that's what
yeah,
we are.
and so part of what we have to do is to make sure, which is why tonight was important. Let's put it out there, let's find out what the issues are, and it's not a situation any of us want to be in. But we have to know what's the basis, it's not us mismanaging, it's that we're getting less money. And, you
Yeah.
know, our whole system for what schooling is gonna look like over the next 18 to 24 months is gonna change. So maybe the old models that we have, we might not be able to do right now.
And whenever you do anything big like cuts,
Yeah.
anything to jobs, you always got to have as much input as you possibly
Of course.
can from the community. So yeah, June 30th, it's a month and 10 days away.
Few days.
4 days. But a lot of people already reaching out. I think a lot more will. And so just, for myself, that's what I'm.
And hopefully, again, I'll say it for the third time, we can push our legislature and our governor and give us some more money, and the cuts do not have to be this drastic. I think that's really has to, I mean, again, anybody who knows me, I am not a political person, and for me to get on that soapbox. There was
A quick question for Larry. Next time we come together, this overtime non-personnel cuts, will you have an itemized list?
I will not be able to have that to you next Tuesday.
Okay.
Either if we schedule another special meeting, I will, or your next meeting after Tuesday is the first one in June, yes.
Okay. I just think it'd be helpful for us to see
Sure.
what those are, because just reading the thread, there are some specific things being called out that could be a concern, and I'd like to see if they're on that list.
So, and one of the other big things going on, and maybe Teresa, you can address this, is just regarding the seniority and when staff will be notified. Maybe you can address some of that, and that's going to have to be based on what we decide to do. So maybe just kind of go over that.
In terms of seniority, I sent the seniority list out in January, first part of February. I had also sent out a Google form asking all of you to verify that your information on the form was correct. I did get some responses, but not near the number of people on that seniority list. I do need just a small amount of time to go back and correct it, because people who have retired and who are currently on layoff status are currently on that list. I need to remove those. Also, if you remember the format of the list, the way it downloads from my position control format, it will list people multiple times based on the number of credentials that they have. So I want to go back through that list and clean it up and list all credentials on one line, so it's easier to see at a glance. If we're talking about 40 people, to go from the bottom of the list to 40 people. So it's easier to clean the information from. So I will need just a little bit of time to clean all that up, and should be able to have it out early next week in terms for your review. For all certificated staff out there, again, I strongly encourage you to take a look at that list and to let me know if there are any changes, modifications. If you have a credential that doesn't appear on my list, I need to know that. So again, that will probably be early next week for you.
One more.
Yeah, please.
Just one more statement. It's pretty obvious through budget cuts we did in February, March, and now, and whatever is going to happen next year, that in the future, man, that reserve has to be way up. It should never have got this low. It did. And it has to be up. I mean, we just can't be making positions on that little bit of money unless it's really, really needed. So I just thought I'd say that because it's been really sticking out to me that reserve it's got to be way up in the future.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
What, I just have one last, really a request. And I'm just thinking about this, if we're gonna have 15 kids in the classroom, I think that district-wide, we have quite a few aides that are in the classrooms with the teachers that are normally used to having 24 or more kids. Could we get a list of that, see what those positions are? I hate to add somebody to that, but if it says teaching positions, I need that to weigh that.
Somebody had a great idea. I'm sorry, I was going to try to end this, but I just, Paul, first of all, can you repeat what you said a little bit louder? It wasn't, not everybody heard. It wasn't.
Yes, what I asked Dr. Fisher to bring us as quickly as possible is a list of the aides that we have in the classroom that have been a support staff for our teachers. And my reasoning for that is it does appear that we're going to have class sizes probably almost half of what we were used to having. And that if there's 15 kids instead of a class rather than 30, maybe that teacher can do without the aid.
So we'll have that for you. Maybe we can have that. We can work on getting that at the board meeting. That's something we could run easily, right? The numbers.
There was another comment which I really like, and this I wouldn't think would be too difficult for us as a board. Can we get a list of personnel? Can we get a list of who our district and where they are? Is that?
No, it's very easy to download.
It would just be nice to be able to look, or I mean, for myself too. That's what, was a suggestion for us as a board to actually look at.
And I think that's great. Look at the district control, you can see how many staff are at which side and so on and so forth. And one of the things that makes it difficult when we're talking about reductions holistically is that the determiners for which staff might be reduced, if you're looking at a group, the determining factor is going to be that seniority list. Right. Which is why Ms. Wood was so critical about that, That's what's going to determine if you're looking at a group, where the line has to go. We'll certainly get that for you.
Definitely. I think unless anybody else here comments, I just wrote down. Again, I'll reiterate, please, please, please continue to post your questions, comments, suggestions on that link on the district website. Again, the slide deck of the proposed will be on the district website also. And one last thing, again, back on my soapbox, please, please, please contact your legislature, please. Whether, again, I've tried to include email addresses, but yeah, please, let's make ourselves known that we don't want to do this. So with that, we need a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion from Carl, a second from Roger. To adjourn, all in favor. Carl?
Aye.
Paul? Aye. Diane? Aye. Myself, aye, and Roger?
Aye.
We're adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.